What's the point of this book and what is the point of this video? Well, the point of this book is something that I'm kind of surprised hasn't been done yet. John Little compiles basically all of the accounts of the various fights that Bruce Lee had.
The art of fighting without fighting? Show me some of it.
Hi there, everybody. Michael Valenti here with the School of Self-Defense, now in Noblesville, Indiana. And today we're going to be answering the age-old question of whether or not Bruce Lee could actually fight. Now, of course, before we get into all of that, we got to take care of the YouTube business. So make sure you hit the thumbs up, click the subscribe button and the little bell so you can get notified anytime I make a new video. If you're also interested in training with me but can't come to train with me personally in Noblesville, we now have online training through our website, Kempo360.com. At Kempo360.com, you can learn the fundamental self-defense that I teach to all of my beginners when they first come into the school. It's about 2 months worth of material that covers stand, clinch, and ground. It's one of the most well-rounded beginners courses out there, and now it's available for you for wherever you live. Check that out at Kempo360.com. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of today, which is talking about this book right here, which is Wrath of the Dragon, The Real Fights of Bruce Lee by John Little. Now, if you are a Bruce Lee fan, then you already know this name, John Little, but for the uninitiated, John Little is by far the foremost authority on the history, life, and times of Bruce Lee. He has unprecedented access to the Bruce Lee estate and all of Bruce Lee's notes. He's also extremely well-traveled and has been researching, studying, and compiling Bruce Lee information effectively for my entire life. I grew up reading John Little's books, and he just came out with this, Wrath of the Dragon, The Real Fights of Bruce Lee. So before we get into whether or not Bruce Lee was a good fighter and whether or not this book proves it, let's quickly go over how John Little actually put this book together. The way he put it together was he would reference old interviews with Bruce Lee and Bruce Lee's family and Bruce Lee's friends and people who said they fought Bruce Lee, reference Bruce Lee's notes, where Bruce Lee said he was when he said he fought people, as well as he tracked down many of these original sources and would compare Bruce Lee's notes and these legendary stories with the stories that the people are telling today. Of course, when you're dealing with a character who is as exaggerated as Bruce Lee, it's really easy to run into a lot of misinformation, but I think John Little truly went out of his way to make sure that every single bit of information in this is as historically accurate as possible. And you can see this in the very end, that if I flip the book to its citations and its notes and everything, they're about, what is that, like a quarter of the book? So a big chunk of this is just notes and citations on like where he got that information, what people said and where they said it. It's an extremely well-researched book. And so I think if you're looking for the definitive guide onto the history of Bruce Lee as a fighter, Wrath of the Dragon, The Real Fights of Bruce Lee is where you want to go. The book is awesome. I highly recommend it. There's also a great audiobook available for it as well. That's actually how I chose to partake of it. So I just have this physical copy for the purpose of holding it in front of this camera. So I thought it was going to be a fairly dry book, but what I really like about it is that it reads like a narrative. So not only do you get the story of his fights, you also kind of get a good overview of Bruce Lee's life from being a child all the way up to the day that he died. So it also serves as kind of a very action-packed version of a biography for Bruce Lee. What's the point of this book and what is the point of this video? Well, the point of this book is something that I'm kind of surprised hasn't been done yet. John Little compiles basically all of the accounts of the various fights that Bruce Lee had, whether they were recorded on camera, which is only one, or if they were recorded through stats like a boxing match that he had in high school, or most of this is anecdotal stories told by people who are either there when he was fighting, or most interesting, people who actually fought Bruce Lee and are recounting what it was like to fight him. On the internet, there is a really stupid argument that Bruce Lee was just an actor and he couldn't fight. And I think people say this because of as kind of like a pendulum swing to the far side of what a lot of people say, which is that Bruce Lee was the greatest fighter of all time, or Bruce Lee was unstoppable, or Bruce Lee was invincible. And I don't think any legitimate Bruce Lee fan, anybody who really understands Bruce Lee and his story, would say that Bruce Lee was an unstoppable fighter. But to say that Bruce Lee couldn't fight would also be an equally weighty mistake to make. This book alone has recorded at least 65 different recorded fights, as far as people like saying that they saw him have this fight or that they actually fought him. So we know of at least 65 different times in which Bruce Lee fought. One of the things to understand, which I think is very important when people are talking about Bruce Lee being a fighter, is like, no, he was not a competitive fighter. He didn't compete in karate tournaments. He didn't, obviously, I don't know if you know this, but like the Ultimate Fighting Championship wasn't really well established back then. So he didn't have like a Valtudo or cage fighting opportunity. He was an actor in Hong Kong. He was an actor in America, both of which the fighting scene was kind of limited. The primary way that you would have fights as a martial artist back in the 1960s was through this process that we called Beimo, or challenge matching, which was effectively somebody says, my kung fu is better than your kung fu, and the two of you would meet up somewhere and you'd have a fight to kind of determine who was the best. And there's a lot of that in this book. At the end of the day, when we look at this, could Bruce Lee fight? It's insanely obvious that Bruce Lee not only could fight, he was a formidable person to have to fight. I think one of the most notable details about this book is the amount of people who are quoted in this book having said that they fought Bruce Lee and lost to Bruce Lee. And I think that's a really telling thing to kind of point towards the truth of the matter, that you have a lot of people who are admitting that they got beaten up by him, or admitting that they fought him and found him insanely difficult to deal with. And the reason why that's an important note is that there's really nothing to gain in saying I got my ass kicked by somebody, right? If I'm going to lie about an altercation that I had with a famous movie star, it would make so much more sense for me to say, yeah, I fought Bruce Lee and I kicked his ass, so therefore I'm awesome, because Bruce Lee's awesome, so I'm really awesome. But no, what's really interesting is that the vast majority of people who he interviews in this book, who said that they had a fight with Bruce Lee, said that Bruce Lee beat the shit out of him and that he was an extremely good fighter. This book covers in great detail his early childhood, especially him losing a fight that kind of gave him the idea that like maybe I should train more martial arts. One big thing for anybody who says like Bruce Lee never competed, you're wrong. He actually competed in high school boxing and he won. And he really didn't seem to like the experience very much. He seemed very frustrated with the fact that he was used to doing street fighting and he was used to hitting with bare knuckles, and even though he knocked his opponent down in literally every single round, he really felt he probably would have gotten the knockout if he had his bare knuckles. It also has an entire chapter devoted to one of the most famous fights in martial arts history, maybe the most famous fight in martial arts history, which is Bruce Lee versus Wong Jack Man. The actual story of Bruce Lee versus Wong Jack Man is one that is filled with a bunch of misinformation. Most notably, they even made a movie about it, which Bruce Lee is painted as this like arrogant prick and Wong Jack Man is painted as this like Zen, flawless Shaolin warrior. For years, there's been a lot of controversy around how that fight played out. The basic story that generally gets told about the Wong Jack Man fight is that Bruce Lee challenged the entirety of, I guess, like Chinatown, saying that his martial art was better than everybody, and that Chinatown martial artists elected Wong Jack Man to come and fight Bruce Lee to show him that Bruce Lee was an idiot and didn't know what he was talking about, and that Bruce Lee and him fought. And then one group says that it was a tie, another group says that Bruce Lee definitively won, and a whole other group says that Wong Jack Man won. And John Little devotes an entire chapter here in a very respectful way examining all of those claims, but also kind of poking holes in a lot of those claims to effectively come out to the conclusion that no, it's pretty obvious that Bruce Lee won that fight. He also points out that probably the situation that led to the fight was not nearly as much of Bruce Lee being a prick as much as it may have been a larger misunderstanding. And even Wong Jack Man himself in this book says that he felt kind of used by the Chinatown martial arts group, that he felt lied to and manipulated into fighting Bruce Lee. It goes on to talk about Bruce Lee fighting various extras. There's a lot of conversations in here with him training with actual champion fighters such as Joe Louis as well. So what's the final conclusion of this book? Once you get done reading it, could Bruce Lee fight? If you go online and you hear and you read or talk or whatever it is about Bruce Lee and whether or not he could fight, there are going to be two groups of people. And I think this is very important just to logically understand. You're going to have the groups of people who never met Bruce Lee, never spoke with Bruce Lee, never, and especially never fought Bruce Lee. And they're the ones who say, Bruce Lee was just a movie star, Bruce Lee couldn't fight. But it's really interesting, as this book shows, that everybody who actually fought Bruce Lee, who actually trained with Bruce Lee, who actually met Bruce Lee, basically all of them agree that Bruce Lee was a bad motherfucker and an extremely, extremely good martial artist. I don't think that Bruce Lee fans are trying to make the claim that Bruce Lee is the best fighter who ever lived. In modern day, we stand on the shoulders of giants, that there are tons of fighters who are much better than Bruce Lee, but I think it's difficult to understate the influence of Bruce Lee on modern day martial arts. Because if you weren't somebody who got into martial arts because of Bruce Lee, undeniably one of your coaches did get into martial arts because of Bruce Lee. He's so influential in that way. So when we say Bruce Lee's the greatest martial artist, we aren't necessarily saying that Bruce Lee's the best fighter ever. We're saying that he's extremely important, that his influence in the martial arts is damn near second to none. He's definitely the most famous martial artist. I don't think there's much argument against that. I also think it's really important to note that when people say Bruce Lee was just a movie star, he couldn't fight, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And I'm really glad that this book has come out to make that very clear, that no, Bruce Lee was the real deal. He could fight, and he won the vast majority of the altercations he had, and usually in a pretty brutal way. I think there's no better proof on earth that Bruce Lee was good than the fact that you have all these people who lost to him and are willing to admit it, even though there's no video evidence of it. I will wrap this video up with a quote from Joe Louis. I think it's just worth repeating. In this book, it ends with an incredible chapter that is just all the different martial artists, not people who necessarily met him, but people who, some met him, some people haven't, but basically kind of singing Bruce Lee's praises and expressing like, yeah, Bruce Lee's the GOAT. And Joe Louis, who is the father of American kickboxing, another person who is, a true legend in the world of martial arts in his own right, he writes about Bruce Lee this. He says, if he is not the greatest martial artist of all time, then he's at least the #1 candidate. Now you guys know that I like to put a little game at the end of every one of these videos to kind of reward the people who actually watch the video all the way to the end. So if you watch the video all the way to the end, I want you to simply include the words "real dragon" into your comment somewhere, and that way you and I will know you made it to the end. And also, if you are at the end of this video, you're clearly enjoying yourself, so be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Click that little thumb button. You know how the YouTube thing works. Now, if you live in the Noblesville, Indianapolis, Indiana area and you'd like to come to train with me, you can come train with me. All the information you need is at theschoolofselfdefense.com. And if you can't come to train with me personally, we now have an online program, Kempo360.com. It's the essential guide to self-defense. It's everything you need to know to get you started and get you on the way to having a lifetime of martial arts. All right, guys, until next time, I'm Michael Valenti with the School of Self-Defense. Fight on.